Welcome to Run, Thrive, Survive with me, your host, Sierra Carter, the #1 podcast for your healthy habits for nutrition and exercise, race reviews from special guests, and everyday motivation. And of course, you guys, surviving life together. Are you guys ready? Let's go. Hey guys, and welcome to another beautiful day here in the Space Coast at the Space Coast podcast studio. I am Sierra, your host here on Run, Thrive, Survive, and we have a wonderful, awesome podcast coming up today, so I cannot wait to get to our guests. But first, I just want to say a few things. Thank you to all of those who are out there supporting and listening to the show. Keep it up, share with your friends, and like and subscribe to this podcast. Give it a 5-star review, and it's going to help, in the rankings and get more content to you. So make sure you subscribe and review it, and go ahead and leave your thoughts, your personal desires, and maybe an inspiration quote there in the comment section. I would love to hear what inspires you. Now, on today's podcast, I cannot wait to dive into this one because we're on the insane side already as runners, but today we've got a awesome guest, Anthony, here on the podcast, and he's going to be talking about a 100-miler that he did. And it's not just any 100-miler, it's the Zion 100-miler. And I cannot wait to hear from him how he trained, what kind of nutrition he did, like everything that he did to get ready for this 100-mile race, because this is one of the top things for runners to aspire to get to, because you think that you're not going to be that person that does this, but somehow you end up doing it. And I know that Anthony has a wonderful story ahead. So I want to go ahead and introduce our guest of the day. Anthony, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
Yes. So I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. Just who are you and how did you get into running? Not 100-milers yet, but how did you get into running?
That's a great question. Running started for me, I was probably a junior in high school, and I always focused on wrestling, believe it or not. But one thing I realized is all the great college wrestlers ran cross country in the fall to get in shape for wrestling season. So I stopped playing football, which I had played for 10 years of my life, and I started running cross country in the fall. And those were between 3 and 5 mile races at the time. And I got myself prepared junior and senior year. And then I just, kept with it. Went to school in Boston, heard about a race called the Boston Marathon. And at the time, I had never run more than 8 miles in my entire life. And I went to go bandit the 1992 Boston Marathon and ran it for the first time as a bandit in 1992 in 3 hours and 37 minutes. So again, started with cross country and then ran it as an experiment in 1992. It was a challenge for my wrestling team, believe it or not. They challenged me the day before the race. The race is on Patriots Day, the third Monday in April every year in Boston. And we went out and did it, and then, fell in love with the sport of running, and the kind of rest is history, and we'll talk about it today.
So was that was your first marathon that you did?
It was, yeah. 3 hours and 37 minutes in Boston as a bandit in 1992.
Wow. How was that race then? Because it's a lot different from what it looks like today. Just a quick overview on that.
The course is the same, but the race was absolutely torture. One is I wasn't prepared, right? We know that these long distance races here are all about preparation. I mean, I was unprepared. I'd run 8 miles in my entire life at the most, so I really wasn't well prepared. I had mesh shorts on. It was a warm day in Boston, and I'm lucky I survived and ultimately got to the finish line. Now, I've learned a lot since then about marathoning, about ultras, about the sport of running. But that was the beginning of it. That was the kind of genesis of my running career, and candidly why I fell in love with it today.
What were your thoughts after that first marathon? Did you want to do more after that, or did you take a break thinking, you know what, that was good enough for me? What were your thoughts after that?
First and last.
Really? And now you're running 100-milers.
First and last. It's amazing fantastic. Where you go. You need a couple days to reflect, and then a week later you're thinking about, well, what's the next marathon? What's the next 10K? What's the next race?
Right. No, it doesn't take us long. It's like a drug. We do one, we want another one, and then we have to keep going. And somehow we end up at 100 milers. So, what is your story to get to this 100 miler? Before we dive into how it was.
Well, I mean, before we get to the hundreds, there's 37 marathons before we get to the hundreds. So
okay, that makes sense.
There's 17 or 18 New York City marathons. There's 12 Boston official after that. Wow. There's the Marine Corps marathon in there.
Yes.
There's a couple Ironmans in there where the marathon is the last leg of the race.
Yep.
There's a marathon in there for 2 hours and 46 minutes and 31 seconds, and that's my PR. And then after my Boston in 2016, I started thinking about, well, what's next?
Right.
We've conquered the marathon. We've completed the marathon. What's next? And I started hearing and reading about ultra marathons. And ultra marathon is technically anything greater than a marathon.
Right.
So it can be a 50K, which is 32 miles. It can be a 100K, which is 62 miles. It can be a 100-mile, which is a long way.
100 miles. So let's just break this apart real quick, because a lot of people will get this confused. I know I did even when I was talking to you at first. 100K is about 38-mile difference than 100 miles. That's a big gap.
It's a big gap, especially late at night
right.
and early in the morning, and when you've been out there for 15 or 20 hours.
Oh my gosh. Now, where was your first 100K? Have you done 100K?
No, I've done, my first ultra was a 50 mile. It was called the North Face 50 in Bear Mountain, which is about an hour and a half north of New York City.
How did you feel after that one?
Well, let's just say when I showed up, there was a nor'easter happening, and I had never run more than a marathon. And the night before, I went out and bought trail shoes.
Oh my! The night before. What did you learn from that?
Again, it goes back to being prepared. It goes
Absolutely.
back to understanding the course. It goes back to speaking to people who did the race, etc. I remember halfway I called my wife and I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I cannot complete this race at about 23 or 24 miles. And she said to me, you can't quit. Because if you quit, it'll eat at you forever.
Absolutely. I was going to ask if she wasn't going to let you quit, was she?
It'll eat you forever.
Yep.
And she's like, I'll be at the finish line. So get there. And I said, okay, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep going. It's when you're distance running, it's a voice, a familiar voice is incredibly powerful.
Yes. Is that, was that your motivation right there, not to quit?
Well, her words still stick in my mind today, and that was 6 or 7 years ago. Wow. You can't quit; you'll regret it forever. You can't DNF.
Nope.
And we'll see you at the finish line. I ultimately got the finish line, and she was the only one there, but we made it.
I love it. Now,
it didn't stop raining. It didn't stop raining all day.
How many miles were in the rain?
The entire race.
Oh, gosh.
It took me 12 hours and 45 minutes to complete, and the entire race was in a nor'easter.
Oh my gosh. But you didn't quit. See, that right there shows an insane amount of grit. No wonder how you got to the 100 miles. You probably felt bored after that one. If you can't go back to a marathon, how does that feel? Real quick before we get into the 100 mile, just asking you, how do marathons, 5Ks, and 10Ks compare now? How do you look at them?
Good question. It's different.
Yeah.
Ultra marathons are about survival. They're about 1 foot in front of the other.
Absolutely.
They're about just moving forward. They're not fast. We'll get into my Zion race, but my average pace was 16-minute miles. When I'm running a marathon or a 10K or a half marathon, I'm racing. I'm trying to move really quickly. I know I'm going to finish the race. The question is, what's my time going to be?
Right. See, that's a cool thing to look at, because I know since I've run marathons, and believe me, I praise you for doing the 100-miler, but when I run marathons now, I look at 10Ks and 5Ks where I don't dread them like I used to. Like, not dread them, but I used to be like, oh no, I have to run a 10K this morning. But now I look at them as like, oh, this is going to be easy, because we've been through the longer ones where it takes a longer amount of time. So it gets easy, not easier, but just different from there. Now, going into these 100-milers, I know Zion wasn't your first one, But how long did it take you to decide after your first ultra that you wanted to do a 100-miler race?
Right after I completed my
Wow.
first 50,
Quick turnaround.
I did the race again because I needed a qualifying time of under 12 hours. So I had to do that North Face 50 again the following year, and I did it in under 12. I think I did an 11:45. So I took about 45 minutes off from my second year versus my first year. I then qualified for 100, and then I said, okay, I'm going to Vermont. That's the race I want to do. I want to go to the Vermont 100.
Okay, so real quick, you brought up a good point that a lot of people have never run a 100-mile or might not know. Do you have to qualify to get to the 100-milers?
Some of them you do.
Okay.
Some of the bigger races, you need to be under 12 hours.
I mean, it makes perfect sense to make sure that they know you can do something like this.
Exactly.
But I just didn't think about that. That's neat. Okay, so you had to qualify Vermont. You got to Vermont, and how was your first one?
So my first one, believe it or not, I DNF'd in my first race.
Oh, no. Where was your wife?
So she was there, and it was very upsetting to me to DNF at that first race.
Absolutely.
And that was 2018. I made it to mile 88.5 and DNF'd, and it was really hard and really tough. I remember it distinctly. I was on a really good pace.
Right.
However, the takeaway is that 2 weeks later, I started training for Vermont 2019.
Wow.
And I often say to myself that success isn't final and it's not fatal. And it got me to go back to the following year. And I went back in 2019. And 2019 race was the hottest race on record in Vermont. It was 99 degrees
The whole
during
race?
4 p.m. during that race on, I think it was July 29th.
Oh, it was in July. Oh. And did you finish it?
I did. I finished in 28 hours and 31 minutes.
Oh my gosh. 28 hours. Imagine, everybody listening to this, just imagine just being in constant movement for 28 hours. Because you're not taking naps during this, are you? No, it's not. It's like barely any resting.
So I took one nap for 10 minutes.
Wow.
It's called a dirt nap. So you just lay on the ground and you have a pacer with you and you close your eyes and you go to sleep for about 10 minutes. And it's amazing the way it makes you feel.
Oh, it's that power nap. I mean, yours is a true power nap, not versus a workday power nap. This is a true power nap.
Exactly.
Now I got an important question for you before we go to break, and then we'll talk about Zion afterwards. Did you stop your watch when you took a nap?
So I did stop my watch because I wanted my time, without the nap.
Absolutely. But I guess it still adds on to your time that they put for you, right?
Correct. Yeah, it was part of my official time. It was a 10-minute nap, and that was part of my 28 hours and 31 minutes when I crossed the finish line, or early the next morning.
I think 10 minutes is warranted. Now, when we come back from this break, we are going to dive right into your Zion 100-miler race because it's a trail one. So I feel like it will be a little bit different, and I can't wait to hear how you trained, how it was versus the Vermont race, and just everything you need to know about this 100-miler. So right after this break, we will get started talking about it.
Great. Can't wait. Thank you.
All right, welcome back from that short break. We are back here with Anthony talking about the Zion 100K. So, without further ado, I want to dive in and ask you, one, how did it go? Walk us through it. When you signed up, what were your thoughts? How did you train? And what was the course actually like versus your training? Got so many questions for you.
So I was actually signed up in 2020 and the race was canceled.
Oh,
so there's
close.
a number of guys in my town that we all run together and we train and we signed up for the race.
We do have that picture if we can pull that up. Is this is your training fam?
Yeah, those are my training fam. So those are 5 of my training partners. So Raymond, Mark, Dave, Jason, and Eric, and then myself in the middle. So that's my group. That's at the start of Zion. That's at about 4:30 in the morning at Zion, right before the race got started.
You guys look too happy, so I can.
Know,
that was definitely before.
So we were supposed to go out and do that race in 2020. It was canceled. So we decided to continue, and we went back certainly in 2021. We spent about 6 months training.
Wow.
And many people, they see the finished product, right? They see the picture at the start. They see the pictures kind of at the end, and they're great because the nice thing is we all finished. 6 of us started and 6 of us finished.
How cool is that?
But there was so much training, Kara, that went into the race. And we happen to live right outside New York City. So it's cold, and there was a lot of snow on the ground. So, I mean, there were a lot of mornings where it was sub-zero or there were 12 inches of snow on the ground. And we had to get up at 5:30 and go out and run 12 or 20 or 30, up to 30 miles.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's not like 6 months is on your side anywhere in New York City. You only go up 4 or 5 months of no snow. So unless it's like at that sweet spot, you get snow. You get cold weather. Now, when you were training, so was it, how far were you into the training when it got canceled?
About 3 months before the race in 2020.
Oh, so you were at like almost peak, close to it?
Yeah, we were getting there. We were disappointed. We were trying to figure out what we can do for an alternative. But at that point, the world was starting to shut down. There were no races. There was nowhere to go. People were doing races on their own virtually. So there wasn't really much to look forward to. But I think, it was a disappointment, but we decided, hey, let's go in and let's go back at it and let's do it in 2021 and train our butts off and work out as a group. And we motivated each other.
Absolutely.
We did speed workout on Tuesdays. We did long runs on Saturdays and Sundays. We did some of the training on our own. And, we went out there and got after it. And had just an incredible experience.
What did 1 week of training look to you? Like when you say long runs back to back, how long were these runs? Did you do any strength training? What did this 1 week, just an average week, look for you for training wise? Like mileage, anything? Yeah.
So on a good week, we did about 75 miles for that week. Wow. And the highlight was 35 miles on Saturday, followed up with 20 miles on Sunday.
Oh my gosh. And then during the week, did you have any cross training or were you just focused on running?
So we did hills on Tuesday. Gotcha. So we have a brutal, torturous hill workout that we do on Tuesdays.
That's awful.
Where, you're at oxygen debt literally the entire time.
Oh, my
and on occasion we did speed. So we went back and forth with speed on a track, and then we did hills on the other Tuesdays. And then, on the, Wednesday and Thursday, we did anywhere from like 6 to 12. And then we generally took, at some weeks, Monday and Friday off.
Oh my gosh. Now, when you were doing this, how did this compare to your Vermont training? Did you use about the same thing? Did you find your formula that works, or did you change it up for Zion?
The nice thing about Zion and training for ultras with the guys that you saw the photo with is that we all train together. So
yeah, that's cool.
To everyone out there, like, find a partner, find a group to train with. It's so much easier. I mean, we run together. We meet at the local high school, and we all go together. And we know that each one of us is counting on each other to be there. So to everyone, find a partner, find a club, find a group to motivate you, and just get you out of bed, because it's not easy getting up at 5 a.m. when it's pitch dark out and it's cold. No. Like, the body doesn't want to do that. Mm-mm. And you need to find reasons to get yourself out and up. And I think once you do, it's much easier from there. When you're out the door, like, it's much easier. But getting up initially is just so hard. And so difficult for most of us.
It's so easy to hit that snooze button. Like, even when it's not cold here in Florida, it's easy to hit the snooze button. I couldn't even imagine in sub-zero weather. Wow.
Or I'll do it later. I mean, we all talk, oh, I'll do it later, right?
Yes.
And you, quite frankly, you never do because
No.
life gets in the way,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We all have work, we have school, we have families, we have other responsibilities that get in the way, and then it's 8 o'clock at night and you don't get around to it. And then you feel guilty the entire day.
Yes, and then your willpower just like completely depletes by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night.
So my advice is get after it early. If you get after it early, you won't look back, you won't regret it, and you'll feel great for the rest of the day.
Do it before your mind wakes up.
Your body's awake.
Don't think about it. Just go. You just got to get up and go. I love that. Now, when you got to the course itself, what did you think? Did you analyze the course, or were you kind of just going into it maybe a little bit surprised? Maybe you knew there was a few hills here and there, because it was a trail run. It wasn't a road race down the flat course across America. It was a trail on a trail, probably no pavement run.
So the one thing I do look at is the elevation.
Yes.
You know, Vermont had 18,000 feet of elevation, which is quite a bit. I mean, there's ultras that have 40,000 feet of elevation. This race had about 11 or 12,000 feet of elevation, so that's what I looked at.
Ooh, okay.
So that's net gain. So if you looked at the up and downs over the course of 100 miles, it had 12,000 net gain of elevation.
Right, and that's still a lot. I mean, I analyzed the course for the 100K on another podcast, and it looked like, you know, you've got two mesas here and there's a valley, so you have to go up steep hills. How did you train for stuff like that, other than your hill workouts? Did you do any, like, mental training, or was it just all physical, pushing yourself, getting your body and mind just used to these miles?
Yeah, it's a lot of being out there also by yourself. You know, it's nice to train with a group, but I also like to do long runs on my own, because I know during the ultra I'm going to be out there for hours on my own, in my own thoughts. And I think that's really, really important as well. So I tried to do that as much as I could throughout the training period. Right. And then we trained in trails as well. So we did some elevation, not nearly, you know, New York isn't Zion, but we tried to simulate it as much as we could.
What was the elevation difference between New York and Zion?
Zion's like I think it's around 6,000, 5,000 or 6,000. It's not too bad. I've also done Bryce. So I did a 50 mile at Bryce a couple of years ago, and the elevation is a little higher at Bryce than it is at Zion. But Bryce was only 50, Zion's 100, so it was certainly a big difference in overall mileage.
It doubles it. That's a lot. That's like doing it twice back to back. So, wow. Now, when you're doing these types of races, how are you eating? Like, what does your nutrition look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, you know, I carry stuff on me like Scratch or some gels or power bars, and I'm constantly kind of refueling with water or Gatorade or where they have out there on the course. And then every 5 miles or so, there's aid stations. So I mean, the most important thing when you're out there is just to hydrate. I mean, when I was in Vermont, it was 100 degrees. So, I mean, just you couldn't hydrate enough. Certainly at Zion, I hydrated as much as I could. But as the race wore on, you couldn't eat another power bar or get down another gel. And I'm sure many people on the podcast know exactly what I mean. Oh, no. And we started going to Coke, ginger ale, and ramen noodles. So I think as we got past 60, again, it was Coke, ginger ale, and ramen noodles became the antidote of what I consumed.
I have to ask you, is this because your stomach was starting to get upset from running so much?
Not really. It's really because I really started to I needed real food.
Oh, okay, that's the difference.
I need a slice of pizza or a chicken parm or some type of soup, but I didn't want to eat any more power bars or power gels.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you think about it, what around what time is that? So if you're doing 28 hours, it's probably 17 miles or 17 hours into this that you're craving actual food.
Yeah, about 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that you'd want that nice big meal, like your 5-course dinner ready for you and ready for a nap. I couldn't even imagine.
Exactly.
Now, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that the tough thing is as the race goes on and the sun goes down and it gets colder and you get to these aid stations and you sit down, it's really hard to get up because there's a roaring fire there and you're eating your ramen noodles and maybe you're having some Coke or some coffee and your legs are tired and it's very difficult to get up. So as the race wears on, you're spending more time at these aid stations than you are during the first half of the race.
How long would you spend at these aid stations? Like, what was your average time? Or what did you strive to be under? Did you, like, time it, or would you just stop until you felt good?
The first 50 miles, honestly, a few minutes at each one.
Okay.
But as the race wore on, probably, like, closer to, like, 15 minutes or 10 minutes.
It's a good power recharge. Nutrients, power recharge.
Indeed.
Was your family there as, I guess, what would you call it, pit crew?
So we had a pit crew that my family wasn't there because they didn't want to get on a plane and come out to Zion, but there was a pit crew there that was supporting us. And I think
awesome.
Having if you decide on doing a race like this, having support and a pit crew is incredibly important. I highly recommend it.
What were they able to do? What's the pit crew there to do?
You have drop bags at these different rest stations, so they'll grab your drop bag for you, so you don't have to go and find it yourself. As soon as you sit down, they'll have something to drink and eat for you. You won't have to go retrieve it on your own.
Absolutely. Now, looking back on Zion, what would you do differently? Even if it's something you learned from Vermont, even if it's something you learned from Zion, what would you do differently? Or maybe what would you change about the course itself?
The course?
If you're the race director, what would you change about the course?
There was one part of the course where there were mountain bikers on the course.
Oh.
And they were coming in the same direction that we were running.
Of course. Oh, so they were behind you. Or no, they were coming head on. All right.
They were coming head on, and we had to watch them, and there were some really tight turns where I couldn't see them.
Right, and they're coming fast.
They're coming really fast, and they're on these big bikes. So I recommend not having a mountain bike race while you're having a 100-mile ultra.
They just don't go together. I don't understand why, but they don't.
They don't.
And now, what would you yourself do differently if you're gonna run it next year? Which I don't know. Are you gonna run it again, or are you gonna find another one?
I'll probably find another one to run.
What would you do differently for the next one?
What would I do differently? That's a really good question. One of the things that I'd probably do is just to understand the course a little bit better. Again, I looked at the elevation, but I really didn't look at the course map all that much.
Right.
One thing I realized with Zion is there were a lot of mesas, believe it or not. And the thing you realize is you can't really run them. They're not runnable.
Mm-mm.
You almost by nature have to do a lot of walking.
Were you on trails the whole time, or you have to kind of make your path?
I kind of explain this to someone, like running on these mesas is almost like running on the moon. It's not trails soft. It's like hard rock.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's not really a trail through them.
Exactly. And they're undulating. It's almost like a big rock. And you're having to navigate these rocks up and down, and it's not soft. And you can't really run them. You almost have to speed walk them is probably the best way to define it.
How was the course signage? Did you ever get lost on the course?
So it wasn't great. However, I didn't get lost. There were pink ribbons everywhere.
Okay.
So, and believe it or not, at night I thought, all right, I'm going to really get lost. But night was even better because the ribbons were reflective.
I was going to ask that because if they're pink, they must have been something. But were reflective off of what? Did you have lights? I'm assuming you had lights. So
yeah, everyone had a light. Okay. Everyone had a headlamp, and some people had a handheld and a headlamp. But you certainly needed them. You needed them actually to start the race because you started in the dark at 5, and then you needed them certainly as you went through the night.
Wow. Now, I just have to ask this question before I ask a few more. Running it at night, could you see other people in the distance with their headlamps?
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially like when we climb the hills, you
Yeah.
could see someone way up
How
because you
cool.
can't see the hill, but you can see the light.
Oh.
So when you're running, you're like, wow, that's a really, really big hill.
it, hopefully it looks higher or steeper in the dark and it's not as steep when you're looking up, but you never know with the mesas. Now, going running through it, what I have to ask this, what was your favorite part about it?
It's a really good question. You know, just being out there,
Right.
in the mountains, in the desert. I ran on my own a lot, and just having being in these national parks and having the freedom and moving, and it's just a great thing. It's just a beautiful thing to be out there and be able to do this kinds of stuff.
That's such an incredible thing. I mean, half marathons and marathons around the national parks are just there. It's you feel freedom. Like the definition of freedom is what you feel when you're out there doing this type of stuff. But I couldn't being out there for 100 miles. You become one with nature, and it's got to be an incredible feeling. You
And
really
for
become
all of
one.
us and for everyone listening, like these aren't our job. It's not our job, right? We do this as a hobby. We do
Yes.
this because we love it. We do it because we love the way it makes us feel. We do it with people we love and we like, and we do it together. And it's just an incredible thing. And we push ourselves and we see how far we can go. And we set our goals really high. I said to Kiara before that like your goals should scare you.
I
You
love
should
it.
always keep pushing yourselves, and if they don't scare you, then find a new goal. The first time I ever decided to run 100, I was petrified, and I said, I don't know how I'm going to make it, but somehow you get there.
And I want to just bringing up one more quote that you said that we talked about prior to starting this pod or filming this podcast. You had said to want what you never had, you must be willing to do what you've never done. I know
Yeah,
you're
that's right.
smiling about that
Yeah,
one. You love that quote.
it's a great quote. If you want what you've never had, you must be willing to do what you've never done. It's such a great quote, right?
I
We
love
all
it.
want these like great things.
Yes.
We all want success. We want to feel successful. But in order to get there, we have to do the things that we've never done.
And I think
So
that's where the gap happens for a lot of people because we get so comfortable. I like to call it, I term the word comfortably miserable, where you want more, but you're just so comfortable you don't want to move.
yeah, my old boss used to say, get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
I love that. That's even a better quote. I love that one. 'Cause
Get
it's so true.
comfortable with the uncomfortable. Do things that push yourself, do things that make you feel uncomfortable. And that's how we grow. That's how we get better. That's how we improve. It's not from doing the stuff that we're good at, it's from doing the stuff that we haven't done before or the areas where we need to improve. And that's just not specific to running, it could be specific to you doing your job or you doing
Absolutely.
something at home.
Absolutely. Now, finishing off with this last question, how has running, and not just running, but your 100 milers, how has that changed you as a person?
I think, I go back to the DNF. The DNF was a real big inflection point for me. And I think failure's okay.
I
In
love it.
fact, I think failure is acceptable because if we're not pushing ourselves to the next level, um, I think that failing's part of that. It's part of the process.
Absolutely.
And I said that before. Failure isn't fatal and success isn't final.
I love
And
it.
it's what we do when we fail. It's how we respond and how we react when things don't go well is clearly like how we're defined. And it's something I'm really proud of that, I failed and it stuck with me for an entire year. I thought about that race every day after I failed, that I went back, I trained harder, I was better prepared, I was focused. I get back to that race. It's the hottest day of the year and I conquered the race. And I have that picture of me at the finish line, 28 hours. And I said, you know what, man, this one feels really sweet. And to everyone listening, it's okay to fail.
Absolutely.
But what we have to do is we have to use that, learn from that, respond from that, make changes, and get better and improve. So that's really what running's taught me about life, about work, about everything I do with my family. And I think that's an important message that I want to share with everyone who's listening.
When
don't feel like you're alone when you fail. It's okay. It's part of the process.
That is the best message to kind of wrap up this podcast with. Do not be afraid of failure. I absolutely love it. I just want to do tie in one more saying there. I don't believe that you fail until you stop trying. So because you didn't stop trying, I don't think you ever failed. It was just one trial that didn't go the way you planned. I would never call it failure. So, Anthony, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. If people want to join you on your next 100 miler, can they find you on Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram, Anthony Run 21.
Awesome. What race is next?
It's a really good question. So I just got into the New York City Marathon for the 17th time.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm excited because New York City is opening up again. That's on November 7th. So it'll be my 17th. I'm really excited about it because last year was canceled.
Yeah.
So I love that race. It's probably my favorite race. I love running through the 5 boroughs and finishing in Central Park. It's nostalgic. It's just something I really, really enjoy. So that'll be probably the next big race. And then in terms of ultras, there's always a next level.
Right.
People have pushed me to run. There was a race a couple of weeks ago, a 250-mile race, or the Moab 240.
Oh my gosh.
So there's other races out there that maybe when I'm not working, maybe I'll think about pushing myself. Those races are anywhere from 4 to 5 days.
Yeah.
So I'll think about maybe doing one of those, but that's down the line.
Hey, we will be watching and applauding you on the sidelines as you decide which race you want to do next. So good luck at New York City. I can't wait to hear and watch you do that one too. That one looks like fun. Someday I'll get into that one. Right now my goal is Boston itself. So thank you so much. If you are listening to this podcast, please, again, like and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and follow me on Instagram at The Runpreneur and on Facebook, Run, Thrive, Survive. Go ahead and like the page so you never miss any content coming out. Follow me over on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can watch the videos as we play them, because we got awesome pictures, videos, everything coming up as well with the videos to the podcast. Other than that, you guys are awesome. I will see you again next week, and get out there and run your lives. Bye, guys.